So this is the land of champions. Okay, Sam Houston is the latest and greatest national champion here in the state of Texas.
Yeehaw, go Bearcats.
They won the FCS National Championship on Sunday, defeating South Dakota State in a thriller. We talked all about it yesterday with Shahan J. Roger, who was there. And coming off of their win and coming off of how really impressive that program has been for a long time, one thing that I couldn't I went back to a podcast that I listened to last week. It's by the gentleman the folks at Split Zone Duo. Split Zone Duo is an excellent college football podcast. Alex Kirshner, Richard Johnson, and Stephen Godfrey, our buddy, do that podcast, and it's an excellent podcast, worth your time. And one thing that they kicked around, because they were talking a little bit about the going into the game, South Dakota State and Sam Houston. And they were talking about how these are two programs that really feel like they're of different mindsets. And the way that they described it is that South Dakota State has kind of carved out a niche for themselves. They know what they are. They are an FCS powerhouse. They want to contend for the FCS national title. They want to beat North Dakota State. And they are happy right there.
With that being their ceiling.
Right there. Their lot in life is we are an FCS powerhouse. That's us. Sam Houston has always been a striver. They've always been, what is the next rung? What is the next thing that we can do? How can we grow? How can we build? You can just take a look at how they've made their leap. From, in 1983, they were in the NAIA. They're still in the NAIA. 1984, they moved up to FCS, to the Gulf Star Conference.
Right.
Then they moved on to the Southland Conference, and now they're moving on to the WAC, the Western Athletic Conference. Now, I don't know what the future holds for the WAC. I don't know. But if you remember, that is a former FBS conference.
Yes.
That is being reconstituted as an FCS conference, is what it is. And it got me thinking about some of, and they made the point on Split Zone Duo that all anybody wants to do is have something to strive for, have something to get excited about, have something to reach for. And Sam Houston, obviously, as national champions, they have that. But they are also a program that, over the course of their history, they have wanted to grow and wanted to build.
Right.
I'm not here to suggest that they're going to make the leap to FBS. What I am here to suggest, though, is I wonder if there is a tier of college football that we are missing. Here's what I mean by that. How many teams, realistically, let's be honest with each other and talk about the college football in a real, like, bare bones, no pretense way.
Okay.
How many teams have a chance of winning the national championship next year in FBS college football? Have a legitimate shot.
5 or 6.
I would
to
say.
Be honest
I
with
would
you?
say if you want to get generous,
Go 7.
there's 7 or 8.
Yeah.
If you want to get generous, there's
Right.
7 or 8 teams that can win an FBS national
and
championship.
that is being generous, to be honest
Right.
with you.
And those are the teams that you're thinking of, right?
Alabama,
Clemson,
Clemson,
Ohio State, Oklahoma. Those teams, right? They can win theirs. Yeah, you'll have a surprise here and there. Like maybe we remember Washington was in the national the playoff one year. Things like Notre Dame is in that mix.
Yeah.
But overall, there is this tier up here at the very top.
That is elite.
That is that they are eligible and can win the national championship, basically. Because there's other teams that I think we're learning in the playoff system as it exists right now are functionally ineligible for the national championship.
Yeah, like a Coastal Carolina.
Coastal Carolina. Functionally ineligible for the national championship. They did everything they needed to get in the playoff, and they couldn't do it. They're undefeated.
Yep.
They're functionally ineligible. Okay? Now, we can talk a little bit about, first of all, I think that the Group of 5, Power 5 dynamic, I reject kind of it outright, but it does matter, obviously, to the people that make the decisions, like the committee. That, like, for example, if Houston goes undefeated this year, I don't see, like, unless there's 4 other undefeated teams in power conferences,
Right.
I don't see a reason that they should be left out of the playoff. And yet,
They will be. If there's only 4 teams in the playoffs,
They almost certainly
group
would
of 5
be.
is not getting in.
They're never getting in.
They're not going to
They're
get
not
in.
going to get in. Like, we need to be honest with ourselves about the way that things are
and
set
people
up.
get upset every single year, but
That's the
how
reality
it
of the
is.
situation.
Like,
I think it stinks,
Yes.
but it's the reality of the situation. And so here is my question. Let's take a program like, and they use this example on Split Zone Duo, so I'll just crib off of it. Let's take a program like Louisiana Monroe, the Warhawks. Who does Louisiana Monroe have more in common with? Their football program. Do they have more in common with Alabama, or do they have more in common with Sam Houston?
Sam Houston by a don't even have to think about it stretch.
By a large margin. By a large margin, okay? Yet Louisiana Monroe and Alabama are competing in the same league, right? My question is there a tier that we're missing? Is there a tier of teams that, they look at like the FBS? Let's be honest. You take a look at Sam Houston State, Sam Houston. Take a look at North Dakota State and South Dakota State, and they are just there's a lot better than a lot of these teams.
Right.
There's a lot better, right? A lot better than a lot of the FCS teams. In the same way that Alabama is a lot better than Louisiana Monroe.
Right.
Right? So my question is there a tier that we're missing wherein you have these, let's call them group of 5 schools, right? Not all of them, but some of them. Some of the group of 5 schools who take the football about as seriously as a team like Sam Houston and stuff like that, that we can find that middle ground and that middle tier that you could find another way of contending. Because, there's always rumors about the Power 5 breaking off from the NCAA and creating their own league. I think that I have a lot of thoughts on the NCAA. I'll save that for another show. But my point is that wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing as long as I think the teams that want to compete up there. Because the thing that's keeping them up there right now is money. It's TV money, and it's and
absolutely,
and that that's what basically keeping them together. That's what keeping the MAC in FBS and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah.
It's the money.
They are not better than the FCS teams, but they get to go play the
so that's my question then. Is there a tier? We think about college football realignment in a way of like, remember when Texas was going to go to the Pac-12? Like, Texas going to go to the Pac-12, right? Here's my thought. What if we rip things up a little bit more and we say, you know what? Let's admit that there is this upper crust of FCS and this lower crust of FBS, and what if we found a way to contend there? We were talking yesterday, you and I were talking about soccer.
Yes.
One of the things I think European soccer does very, very well is
constant movement.
Promotion and relegation, right? The idea that you will land where you can be the most competitive and stuff like that.
And 3 teams go up when 3 teams go down.
Because right now, like, I think if you plug Sam Houston, this team, now obviously there's different rules with scholarships and things like that, but if you were to plug this Sam Houston team into the Sun Belt, I think they'd do some damage.
Yeah.
I'm not saying
you can't tell me they wouldn't be competitive against Texas State.
I'm not saying they're going to go out there and they're going to beat Coastal Carolina, but what I am saying is that I think they'd be competitive in most of their Sun Belt games. And so my question is, again, just spitballing, it's May, it's the offseason, whatever. Is there a tier of college football that we're missing?
But let me play devil's advocate real fast, just for the sake of argument. If we were to combine the upper echelon, or like the good group of 5 schools per se, and the good FCS schools, and you take it and put those together and then put the bottom half of the FBS schools with the bottom half of that, does that still negate the fact that there will most likely be some sort of a gap? It's almost like you need the bad FBS schools to go with. Like, if you're going to make another level, you got to put the bad with the good to seed.
Yeah, you've got it. You've got Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm just and that's why, first of all, I go back to the Power 5 thing. Like,
but then that almost just seems like that's just group of 5 still.
Houston is, in my mind, a Power 5 team. You know what I mean? But my thing is, why are we pretending? Why are we pretending that Louisiana Monroe can win the national championship even if they go 13-0 and win the Sun Belt.
Right. So are you saying more along the lines? What if you left an FCS rank and then you actually took the split of Group of 5 and Power 5 and actually made that split? Is that kind of
I think
the thought process
I think that the splits right now are so harsh and so firm
that there does need to be a cut, hard cut.
I think there needs to be some sort of
and they get their own playoff.
Some sort of in between. That I think that, I would love to see Sam Houston play against some of these FBS teams because I think they contend. And I think that would give every team something to strive for. That Louisiana Monroe could then go for a national championship in that regard. And again, the one thing keeping them there is not because they just love football so gosh darn much. It's the money aspect. And I don't know. It was something
it's like
that
it was a Conference USA team.
It was a good conversation.
Have something to compete for.
On Split Zone Duo, which is an excellent podcast that you should listen to. And it just got me thinking. Watching Sam Houston win a national championship on Sunday got me thinking about how this is a program that's obviously on the rise and takes football extremely seriously and has always been a striver. Is there another level for them? And what does that look like if we are going to blow up the NCAA, which we should?
I like Matthew McSpadden's point. What about a bilineal realignment like the UIL does?
I think that's great.
I love that. I think
that's great too. But the thing again,
it's
this is fun to talk about, but like in the end,
happen.
It's going to come down to contracts, which is just like TV contracts, which is not something we can do. Although, I don't know. I think ESPN kind of cuts the legs out from underneath their own programming because I think that they have a lot of FCS content. They own the rights to the FCS and they kind of bury it on ESPN Plus. And I'm like, I think that hopefully I haven't seen the ratings, but I hope that Sam Houston and South Dakota State spiked a big rating because I hope people realize. And Bill Connolly's got a great piece on ESPN.com about this, about how I think people realize that like if you watch small college football, like it will make you a bigger college football fan, and it'll make you appreciate even more when you're watching Alabama versus Auburn or something like that. You know what I mean? You're watching A&M versus LSU. Like you'll appreciate it more, by watching great small college football as well. Anyway, that's just a thought that I had going through my brain, so I thought we'd do a segment about it.